Hi friends, it's Deanna here today, and today we're working on the kids' Cami, Undies, and shorts set. I am super excited about this set, and so let's get sewing! Alright, the first thing I'm going to do, I already cut out all my pieces, and I'm going to show you how to use the binding for the cami, but you don't have to use binding if you don't want to. You can just use like peacoat elastic, which will look cute, but I'm just going to go ahead and use the binding. You will see a seam right here on mine because I didn't have a long enough piece to make it on the fold, so I cut it and pieced it together. So I cut it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, pieced it together, make sure it was long enough to fit the pattern size. But just know that if you do something like this, you will have a seam on it. So you're not meant to have a seam right there, but I just didn't have one long enough. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna prep my binding first. So I've got like, these are my marks where my binding, you know, it's gonna mark where they're gonna go, but I'm just gonna move them right now because I obviously can't steam with that on, so I'll have to put them back on, use my pattern piece and put them back on. But I'm going to fold my fabric first, wrong sides together, and steam, and go all the way down, and then I'm gonna go ahead and fold those edges in to that half piece and steam. And some people like to use like starch or something like that to keep it down. I'm just steaming because really you just need the crease. That's what you're going for. So sometimes what I like to do is when I'm done steaming and it's hot. When I'm done steaming and this is all ready to go, I'll just fold it up, steam it again, and leave it like, whew. It is gonna be a little hot as you're doing it. And then I'll just kind of pin it down, clip it down to leave it like this so it'll keep that crease. So I'm gonna do that for the rest of my binding and my front binding and my back binding. All right, this is my front piece. I'm gonna grab it and turn it wrong side out. I'm gonna grab my front piece binding piece, and I'm going to place it right there. You can find the half if you want, so you know exactly where the half is, and put it right at the half. And you're gonna go up to one side, matching those raw edges, putting the right side of my binding to the wrong side of my tank. And I'm gonna go over and sew that on. You can use your serger or a zigzag stitch, stretch stitch to attach that on to that neckband. Then while I'm at that over there doing that, I'm gonna turn it around, and I'm going to attach my back to my front of my cami. So I'm gonna sew that on, and I'm gonna go ahead and attach this one, the sides too. Just because I like to go ahead and get a couple steps done. I don't know why I am that way. But honestly, I just piece things together and then go sew them, try to sew them all at the same time. What do you do? Do you sew one thing at a time, or try to get as many things done at the same time as you can? All right, let's go sew those. All right, so here's the front of my cami. I'm pushing that seam allowance up. I'm gonna grab my binding. I'm gonna fold it down on that first fold, and then I'm gonna fold it down over that seam allowance and clip. and then I'm going to go over to either my cover stitch or my serger and top stitch that down. So or my sewing machine, not my serger. I'm going to use my cover stitch. I have a cover stitch that will sew this down. If you don't have a cover stitch, you can use a zigzag stitch or some kind of decorative stitch that has a good stretch right here on the neckband. If you have questions about how to do binding, there is a video on our YouTube channel that shows just how some different ways to do that. So check that out. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that right now. All right, my binding is done. Now I'm gonna grab my cami. I matched my seams and I went to the back and I matched where my back is, and I did a little notch right there. Bloop. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and also mark my binding. I almost just threw that in the ground, and then I thought, no, just throw it away where it belongs. Okay, so I'm folding my binding in half. I already have my half marked because that's where my seam is, and I'm going to mark those dots because that is where I'm going to go on my, that's what's gonna guide me on where it's gonna go when I sewing it on. So we're gonna go ahead and put our binding right side of it down to the wrong side of our cami and pin right there in that half spot. So the half of your band to the half of your cami. Remember, I have this seam right here because I pieced it together. Then I'm gonna stretch it to that seam. This right here is my the placement for my strap when I pin went flying. The placement for my strap when I come around. But you know what? I'm gonna have to redo that. I keep marking things and having to redo them because I'm gonna sew right here. So obviously I can't sew over this. So there we go. And then the next one. So just stretch it to the other side and pin, matching those raw edges. And then we're gonna come up the front. And this is your mark for your, right here at the end of your strap. And pin those raw edges, or clip. I use clips, but I still call it pin because I'm so used to pins. Then I'm gonna go to my serger or my sewing machine and sew this on, just like we did on our front. So all the way around. Alrighty, now what you're going to do, here it is, we're gonna do the same exact thing we did for our neck. We're gonna fold on that first fold, we're gonna move the seam up, and then we're gonna fold again over that seam. Right there. Okay, and we're gonna go all the way up and all the way around. When we get to this corner, we're also going to fold that other side in. So both of those are in. And then right here is gonna go right over that seam right there. But then the rest of the time, over here is just gonna go on top of each other. All the way down. All right, now I'm gonna go over to my cover stitch or use a zigzag stitch and top stitch that all the way around. Now, if you were going to use the elastic, the pretty elastic, all you'd have to do is go ahead and attach your elastic to that raw edge and just like zigzag stitch it on and then fold it over and then top stitch it. So it'll be on the same steps we're doing for the binding, except for this will be your binding and you wouldn't have to fold it around. You just top stitch it, fold it, top stitch it, and then it'll be right around the edge. That will be it. That would be super cute as well, but I went with binding just because I'm difficult. So let's go ahead and sew that on. All right, our cami is almost done. So what I'm gonna do now is, honestly, for a better fit, best fit, you might wanna try your cami on your, whoever you're sewing it for, and see how long you want your straps, how long you wanna sew them on. But if you don't have your model with you, you can grab your pattern piece and mark where the placement is of the straps. don't have my model with me right now, so I'm just gonna pretend, but I'm gonna try it on her. So I'll sew these up later. But we're gonna go ahead and put those right on that mark. I wish I had a pin right here so I could just, oh, there it is. And I'm going to go ahead and put my strap right on that marking, and then I'll go over to my sewing machine and either zigzag stitch it on or triple stitch it on, or however you want to stitch that strap on right there. It is great. Maybe do a back and forth zigzag on it. And there it is. Now we're just gonna go ahead and hem. This is the wrong side, so you're like, that's funny. No. We're gonna go ahead and fold half an inch hem right here and go over and hem with a stretch stitch or on our cover stitch, which is what I'm doing. I'm gonna go ahead and hem on my cover stitch. My iron is all the way over there, so I'll do that in a minute. So I'm gonna put that tank aside and finish it up in a little bit once I'm doing other top stitching. And we're gonna move on to our shorties. So I'm gonna grab my shorties. These are both my backs together, right sides together, and both my fronts, right sides together. And I am going to sew this crotch seam on both. Now, the front rise, it's lower, so make sure that your rise matches because you're sewing them together. You're sewing, sometimes we sew, you could get confused and we will sew like our front and our back together or whatever, but right now you're sewing your front to your front and your back to your back. So make sure your rise matches, that the pattern piece is the same pattern piece. I'm gonna go ahead and sew that right there. All right, now we're gonna grab this, open up my shorties and grab the crotch seam, and I'm going to match it. See, I kind of sewed that a little bit crooked. That's okay. And we're gonna go to one side and sew it, and then to the other side and sew it. I'm just gonna sew with my serger. So let me go do that real quick. All right, now I'm gonna open it up. If you are using a liner, you're gonna go ahead and put it right there and baste those sides. So like that little corner that goes in goes right at the middle, and then go to one side. Actually, you know, I'm going to use pins because then, I know y'all probably don't like this, but I can sew over them easier than clips. So it will be, well, you really can't sew over clips, so anything would be easier. I'm going to baste it together because then when we sew the sides, it'll get cut in there. You can, if you want to, you can finish that raw edge. I'm not going to because it's just extra finishing. I don't want to add to it, but it's up to you if you want to. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to top stitch that on as well. So what I am going to do is I'm gonna top stitch it from the other side. So that way the stitching is on this, sorry. You can, so that way the stitching is on the other side, the cover stitch, the straight stitching is on the other side, and the other stitching is, the back of the stitching is right here. Or you could use, I think I might just go ahead and do the zigzag stitch, which is what the pattern mentions, because that will be less bulky. So just zigzag stitch or stretch stitch that on at the top and at the bottom. I'm just gonna go ahead and do that on my sewing machine. Just stretch stitch it right there and baste those sides. That's a lot of pins. All right, I am set on zigzag stitch. I'm gonna go right over that. I'm gonna try to remove my pins as I go. All right, so two things. I did not realize that I was set on my longest stretch stitch, so I have this really wide stretch stitch on there. That's all right. I'm not gonna worry about it. Are you gonna worry about it? And so there it is, and I did not match my points right there. You do better than me, please. And then I'm gonna fold it right sides together, and I am going to match those sides, and then I'm gonna go ahead and sew those sides together. All right, trimming all these loose threads. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is at the legs, I'm going to go ahead and hem. Come on, it's like attaching to me. We're gonna hem those legs at a 1/2 inch. When I go hem these legs, I'll go ahead and hem my tank as well. So that will be one leg, and then the other leg, and I need to steam it. So hem those legs. And then if you're doing elastic, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to go ahead and sew that elastic on the round. So I'm just gonna do a zigzag stitch on my sewing machine real quick. And then I'm going to mark it and quarter it. So from the back to the front, match the back and the front, and go to the sides. One side, other side. And then I'm gonna attach that to my shorties. As you can see, the higher rise is the back. And to the wrong side of my shorties. Okay. If you're doing the waistband, and you need help with the waistband, we have a video that's called bands, and it goes all through how to attach bands and stuff, and so you can check that video out, be helpful. So now I'm gonna go ahead and as I stretch lightly, I'm sewing this elastic to my the top of my shorts with your preferred stretch stitch, so zigzag or serger, whatever you want to. I am going to go ahead and go with the zigzag so it's less bulky, because then we're gonna fold it over and top stitch, and sometimes when I do my surgery it gets a little bulky, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna sew that, and I'm gonna hem both the tank and the shorties. So while I'm also gonna top stitch that, I figured I'd just go ahead and do my band as well. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fold it down on itself and pin and top stitch it on. So I'm unfolding it, then I'm gonna go around and top stitch all around. I'm gonna be stretching it as I go, so make sure that these points match up because I'm gonna be stretching it. All right, time for undies. So you can go ahead if you want to finish that top raw edge of your liner. I'm just gonna leave it raw just because I don't like that extra, and it's knit so it can be left raw. I'm gonna grab, this is my front, and I'm gonna grab my back and put it right on top. If you want to go ahead and baste these two together first and then put the bottom, the gusset in, you can do that. I'm just gonna go ahead and place it right on top for now, and then this piece, that rounded area, is gonna go right here as well. So we're gonna baste all three together. Well, we're gonna sew all three together, but if it helps you to baste first each layer, then you can go ahead and do that if you'd like. I'm just gonna go ahead and go for it because you all know that's how I am. Make sure these raw edges are all lined up in a row. So if you wanted to go ahead and baste these on together before you sew them, you can do that. But I'm gonna go over to my sewing machine. It can be zigzag, it can be serger, whatever you want, and I'm gonna sew these three pieces together. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. All right, sewn together. Now I'm gonna go ahead and fold this one, the gusset, up towards the panty, and then we're gonna top stitch that on. You can do that with a cover stitch or a zigzag stitch, just like we did on the shorties, however you want to. So I'm gonna do exactly like I did on the shorties and just zigzag stitch that on right there. And then I'm gonna grab my undies and fold and sew that side, right sides together. Alrighty, time for elastic. I am using this fancy cute peacock elastic. And I'm just trimming those. I'm going to grab it and I'm gonna go all of them, my waistband elastic, and my two legs. I'm gonna go over to my sewing machine and just do a zigzag stitch back and forth right here to attach them together. Now I'm going to quarter all these bands. So I'm gonna go to the front, well, all these elastics, to the front, match the front and the back, and go to the sides. I'm gonna do that for all of them. And then I'm gonna do the quarter the undies. I'm gonna grab the seams and go to the back, and I like to quarter them with a little notch, just small enough that it will be caught in the seam allowance, but big enough that I can see it if my pins move or whatnot. And if you match the front and the back, these are my sides. So then with my leg, we're gonna match the front and the back. Actually, we're gonna go from the side, we're gonna go to the front, which is not quite that seam, so it's like right in the middle front of it, of the liner. Then we're gonna go to the front, one side, and then to the other side. And I'm gonna do that for the other leg as well. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and grab my elastic. Make sure you've got the right size, that's my waist, okay? And I'm going to attach it right side to the top. And I want that straight edge to be touching the straight edge of my undies, because then once they're attached, I'm going to flip it and top stitch so you'll see that pretty side. Oh, I went the wrong way. There we go. So pin it to all my quarters. And I'm gonna do the same for the leg elastic. I'm gonna pin that to my my legs as well, or clip or whatever. All right, now I'm gonna go over and with that stretch stitch, stitch that on. So I'm gonna do the same thing that I did when I attached my elastic to my shorties. I'm gonna zigzag stitch it on. All right, now it's been zigzagged on, and now we are just one step away. I'm gonna fold that elastic towards the inside, and we're going to top stitch it on. And we're gonna do that for all of them. So you can either do a zigzag stitch, triple stitch, double needle, or cover stitch, however you want to do that. I'm gonna go over to my cover stitch and finish these up, and we'll be done with our cute set. All right, friends, we are finished with this cute, cute, cute little set. How adorable is this? Super, super cute and actually pretty simple. So let me know if you have any questions about anything that I did. Comment, like, share, subscribe if you haven't, so you can be entered for our giveaway of $50 Ellie and my gift certificate. Come find us on Facebook and Instagram so you can see what everybody else is making and you can be inspired. Go grab your pattern, get to sewing, and I'll see you next time.